Most people think surrogacy is just about having a baby for someone else. But what if I told you that surrogate mothers can actually use their own eggs, and there's a scientific reason behind it? Stick around because fact number 7 is going to completely change how you see this whole process. Surrogacy has been around way longer than you think, and it's way more complex than what you see in movies or hear from your friends. Today, we're going through 10 facts about surrogacy that most people have no idea about. Some of these are going to sound wild. Some might even make you uncomfortable, but all of them are real. Whether you're thinking about becoming a surrogate, looking for one, or you're just curious about how this all works, these facts are going to clear up a lot of confusion. Let's get into it. Here's the thing. Surrogacy gets talked about a lot, but most of what people know is wrong. You've probably heard someone say that a surrogate is basically selling her baby, or that it's some kind of easy way to make money. Maybe you've seen news stories that make it seem sketchy or desperate. The problem is that nobody really explains what surrogacy actually is, how it works, or why people choose it. And because of that, there's a ton of judgment and misunderstanding floating around. The truth is, surrogacy is a medical process with legal contracts, real emotions, and life-changing decisions on all sides. It's not simple, it's not weird, and it's definitely not what most people think. So before we judge it or assume we know what's going on, we need to understand the facts. Real facts. Not rumors, not movie plots, not Instagram captions. Just the straight truth about what surrogacy really involves. Let's start with fact number 1. Fact 1. There are 2 types of surrogacy, and they're completely different. When most people hear the word surrogacy, they picture one thing. But there are actually 2 main types, and the difference between them is huge. The first type is called traditional surrogacy. In traditional surrogacy, the surrogate uses her own egg. That means she's the biological mother of the baby. The sperm comes from either the intended father or a donor, and the surrogate gets pregnant through artificial insemination. This type used to be more common back in the day, but now it's pretty rare. Why? Because it creates a lot of legal and emotional complications. If the surrogate is biologically related to the baby, things can get messy really fast. The second type is called gestational surrogacy. This is the most common type today. In gestational surrogacy, the surrogate has 0 genetic connection to the baby. The egg comes from either the intended mother or an egg donor, and the sperm comes from the intended father or a sperm donor. Then, doctors create an embryo in a lab using in vitro fertilization, which is IVF. After that, they transfer the embryo into the surrogate's uterus. So she carries the baby, but the baby is not biologically hers. This makes things way clearer legally and emotionally. And that's why most surrogacy arrangements today are gestational. Fact 2. Surrogacy has been around for thousands of years. You might think surrogacy is some new trend that started with modern medicine, but it's actually ancient. Like really ancient. The first recorded surrogacy arrangement appears in the Bible. In the book of Genesis, there's a story about Sarah and Abraham. Sarah couldn't have children, so she asked her servant Hagar to have a baby with Abraham. Hagar got pregnant, gave birth to a son named Ishmael, and that child was considered Sarah and Abraham's. That's surrogacy. It wasn't called that back then, but that's exactly what it was. This kind of arrangement happened in other ancient cultures too. It was a way for families to continue their bloodline when the wife couldn't get pregnant. Of course, back then, it was always traditional surrogacy because they didn't have a technology for anything else. But the idea of one woman carrying a baby for another woman or couple has been part of human society for thousands of years. It's not new. It's not strange. It's just become more advanced and more regulated over time. Fact 3. Surrogates go through a ton of medical and psychological screening. You can't just wake up one day and decide to be a surrogate. It's not that easy. There's a whole screening process that can take months. First, there's the medical side. Doctors need to make sure the surrogate is healthy enough to carry a pregnancy. They check her medical history, do physical exams, run blood tests, check her uterus with ultrasounds, and review any past pregnancies she's had. Most agencies require that a surrogate has already given birth to at least one healthy baby. Why? Because it proves that her body can handle pregnancy and that she understands what pregnancy actually involves. But it's not just about physical health. There's also a psychological screening. A licensed mental health professional will meet with the surrogate to make sure she's emotionally ready for this. They ask questions like, why do you want to be a surrogate? Do you understand that you'll have to give the baby to the intended parents? How will you handle that emotionally? Do you have support from your family? Are you financially stable? Or are you doing this because you're desperate for money? That last one is important because most agencies won't accept someone who's only doing it for financial reasons. They want surrogates who genuinely want to help someone else have a family. On top of all that, the surrogate's partner or spouse also gets interviewed. Why? Because this affects the whole family. If the surrogate is married, her husband needs to be on board. If she has kids, they need to understand what's happening too. It's a big decision that impacts everyone, not just the surrogate. Fact 4. Surrogates don't do it for the money alone. Let's talk about money, because this is where a lot of people get confused. Yes, surrogates get paid. In the United States, a surrogate can make anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 or more, depending on the state, the agency, and the arrangement. That might sound like a lot, but let's break it down. Pregnancy lasts 9 months. During that time, the surrogate has to go to tons of doctor appointments, take medications, deal with morning sickness, give up alcohol and certain foods, maybe stop working if the pregnancy gets complicated, and then go through labor and delivery. When you divide that payment by 9 months, it's not some huge windfall. It's compensation for time, effort, physical discomfort, and risk. But here's the thing. Most surrogates don't do it just for the money. Studies and interviews with surrogates show that the main motivator is wanting to help someone else. A lot of surrogates have their own kids and can't imagine life without them. So when they meet someone who's struggling to have a baby, they feel called to help. Some surrogates have a friend or family member who went through infertility, and that inspired them. Others just feel like it's a way to do something meaningful with their body. The money is nice, sure, but it's not the only reason, and for most surrogates, it's not even the main reason. Fact 5. Intended parents spend way more than you think. If you think surrogacy is expensive for the surrogate's payment, wait until you hear what the intended parents spend. The total cost of surrogacy in the United States can range from $90,000 to over $150,000. Let that sink in. That's more than most people spend on a house down payment. So where does all that money go? First, there's the surrogate's compensation, which we just talked about. Then there's the agency fee. Most people use an agency to find a surrogate, and agencies charge anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 just to match you with someone and manage the process. After that, there's the IVF process. Creating embryos in a lab isn't cheap. You're looking at $15,000 to $30,000 for one IVF cycle, and sometimes it takes more than one try. Then there are legal fees. Both the surrogate and the intended parents need their own lawyers to draft contracts, and that's another $15,000 to $20,000. But wait, there's more. You have to pay for the surrogate's medical expenses, including all her prenatal care, delivery, and any complications. You also have to cover things like maternity clothes, travel costs if the surrogate lives in a different state, health insurance or a supplemental policy, and sometimes even lost wages if the surrogate has to stop working. Oh, and if the surrogate is carrying twins or has a C-section, there are extra fees for that too. All of this adds up fast. That's why surrogacy is only an option for people who have serious money saved up or access to loans. It's not something most people can afford, and that's a hard truth. Fact 6. Not every country allows surrogacy. This is a big one. Surrogacy laws are all over the place depending on where you live. In the United States, surrogacy is legal in most states, but the rules are different in each one. Some states, like California, are super surrogate-friendly. They have clear laws that protect both the surrogate and the intended parents. Other states, like New York, only recently made compensated surrogacy legal. And a few states, like Michigan, have laws that make paid surrogacy a crime. Yeah, a crime. So if you live in the wrong state, you might have to travel somewhere else to do this. Outside the United States, it gets even more complicated. In Canada, surrogacy is legal, but paying a surrogate is not. You can reimburse her for expenses, but you can't pay her a fee. That's called altruistic surrogacy. In the United Kingdom, it's the same deal. Surrogacy is legal, but it has to be altruistic. In countries like France, Germany, and Italy, surrogacy is completely banned. It doesn't matter if it's paid or unpaid. It's illegal. In some countries, like India and Thailand, surrogacy used to be a huge industry, but the government's cracked down and now only allow it for citizens or in very specific cases. So if you're thinking about surrogacy, you need to know the laws in your country and your state. And if you're an intended parent looking for a surrogate in another country, you better get a lawyer because international surrogacy comes with a whole extra layer of legal issues, including how you're going to get your baby home and whether your country will recognize you as the legal parents. Fact 7. The surrogate has no genetic connection to the baby in gestational surrogacy. This is the fact I teased at the beginning, and it's one of the most misunderstood things about modern surrogacy. In gestational surrogacy, the surrogate is not the biological mother. She's not using her own egg. The egg comes from either the intended mother or an egg donor. The sperm comes from the intended father or a sperm donor. Scientists combine them in a lab to create an embryo, and then that embryo is implanted into the surrogate's uterus. So genetically, the baby has 0 DNA from the surrogate. 0. People get confused about this all the time. They think that because the surrogate is pregnant, the baby must be partly hers. But that's not how it works. Pregnancy and genetics are two separate things. The surrogate is providing her body as a safe place for the baby to grow, but she's not contributing any genetic material. Think of it like this. If you plant someone else's seeds in your garden, the plants that grow are not your plants. You're just providing the soil and water. The surrogate is the garden. The baby is the plant. And the intended parents or donors are the ones who provided the seeds. This is why gestational surrogacy is so much more common than traditional surrogacy. It removes the genetic connection, which makes everything clearer. There's less emotional attachment, fewer legal battles, and a much smoother process overall. The surrogate knows from day one that this baby is not hers. She's helping someone else grow their family, and that's it. Fact 8. There are legal contracts for everything. Before any medical procedures happen, there's a legal contract. And I'm not talking about a one-page agreement you sign at the doctor's office. I'm talking about a detailed, sometimes 50-page contract that covers every single possible situation. This contract is drafted by lawyers, and both the surrogate and the intended parents have to have their own separate legal representation. Why? Because their interests are different, and they both need someone looking out for them. So what's in this contract? Pretty much everything. It covers how much the surrogate will be paid and when. It explains what happens if the pregnancy results in twins or triplets. It details what happens if there are medical complications or if the baby is born with health issues. It talks about who makes medical decisions during the pregnancy. It covers whether the surrogate is allowed to have sex during certain parts of the pregnancy, whether she can travel, what foods or activities she needs to avoid, and even how much contact the intended parents will have during the pregnancy. The contract also covers what's called selective reduction. This is a tough topic, but it needs to be addressed. If the surrogate is pregnant with multiples, and the doctors recommend reducing the number of embryos for health reasons, who gets to make that call? The contract spells it out. It also covers termination. If there's a serious medical issue with the baby, or the surrogate's life is at risk, who decides whether to continue the pregnancy? These are heavy emotional questions, and they have to be decided before anyone gets pregnant. Once the contract is signed, it's legally binding. That means everyone has to follow it. If someone breaks the contract, they can be sued. This might sound cold or businesslike, but it's necessary. Surrogacy involves huge emotions, life-changing decisions, and a lot of money. The contract protects everyone involved and makes sure there are no surprises. Fact 9. The surrogate's name is not on the birth certificate. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. When the baby is born, the surrogate's name does not go on the birth certificate. In most cases, the intended parents are listed as the legal parents from day one. This is called a pre-birth order or a parentage order, depending on the state or country. Before the baby is even born, the intended parents go to court and get a legal document that says they are the parents. When the baby is born, the hospital puts their names on the birth certificate, not the surrogates. This is one of the reasons why legal contracts and lawyers are so important. Without that pre-birth order, things can get messy. In some states, the surrogate would automatically be listed as the mother because she gave birth, and then the intended parents would have to go through an adoption process to become the legal parents. That's risky and complicated. So most surrogacy-friendly states have laws that allow intended parents to establish their legal parentage before birth. In states or countries that don't have clear surrogacy laws, this process is way harder. Sometimes the intended parents have to wait until after the baby is born to go to court. Sometimes they have to adopt their own biological child. And in the worst cases, if something goes wrong, the surrogate could legally keep the baby, even though she has no genetic connection to it. That's why location matters so much in surrogacy. Fact 10. The relationship between surrogates and intended parents varies a lot. Some people think surrogacy is this cold, transactional thing where the surrogate and intended parents barely know each other. But that's not usually true. In most cases, there's a real relationship. Now, how close that relationship is depends on the people involved. Some surrogates and intended parents become really close friends. They text every day. The intended parents go to every doctor's appointment. They're in the delivery room when the baby is born, and they stay in touch for years afterward. The surrogate might even become like an aunt to the child. Other arrangements are more professional. The surrogate and intended parents are friendly and respectful, but they're not best friends. They communicate through the agency. They update each other when necessary, and after the baby is born, they might exchange a few messages or photos, but that's it. And that's okay too. Every surrogacy journey is different, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. What matters is that both sides are honest about their expectations from the beginning. If the intended parents want to be really involved, they need to say that. If the surrogate prefers more space and privacy, she needs to say that. The agency and the legal contract help set those boundaries. But at the end of the day, surrogacy is about people. Real people with feelings, hopes, and fears. It's not just a business deal. It's a human experience, and that means emotions are going to be part of it no matter what. So after going through all these facts, here's the big takeaway. Surrogacy is not what most people think. It's not easy money for the surrogate. It's not a sketchy loophole for rich people. It's not some weird experiment. It's a legitimate, legal, medically supervised process that helps people who can't have children on their own become parents. And yeah, it's complicated. It's expensive. It's emotional. It involves lawyers, doctors, psychologists, contracts, and a whole lot of trust. But for the people who go through it, whether they're the surrogate or the intended parents, it's worth it. Think about it. For the intended parents, this might be their only chance to have a biological child. They might have tried for years to get pregnant. They might have gone through miscarriage after miscarriage. They might have a medical condition that makes pregnancy impossible or life-threatening. And now, because of surrogacy, they get to hold their baby. They get to be parents. That's huge. And for the surrogate, she gets to do something that most people will never do. She gets to give someone the greatest gift imaginable. She gets to create a family. She gets to take something her body can do naturally and use it to change someone's entire life. That's powerful. That's meaningful. And yeah, she gets paid for it, but the payment doesn't take away from the fact that what she's doing is incredible. Surrogacy is one of those things that's easy to judge from the outside but impossible to fully understand unless you've been part of it. It's not perfect. There are ethical debates, legal challenges, and emotional risks. But it's also beautiful in its own way. It's people helping people. It's science and medicine and law all coming together to make something amazing happen. It's proof that family doesn't have to look one specific way and that there are lots of different paths to parenthood. If you walked into this video thinking surrogacy was weird or wrong, or just for celebrities, I hope these facts changed your mind at least a little bit. And if you're someone who's considering surrogacy, either as a surrogate or as an intended parent, I hope this gave you a clearer picture of what you're getting into. It's not simple, but nothing worth doing ever is. If this was helpful, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.